Welcome to another episode of The Inquisitive Analyst. I'm your host, Marcus Udikang. It's the show where we chat about business analysis and project management issues and the triumphs and challenges within those fields. It's inspiring, informative, and as always, very much inquisitive. My guest today is a strategic communication professional and a certified project manager. She's worked extensively with corporate communication and social impact programs with companies like the Caribbean Cement Company, the Caribbean Development Bank, and Scotiabank Jamaica. She was also, interestingly enough, an event manager for Jamaica's contingent at World Skills held at the Stampede Grounds here in Calgary, Canada. So please help me welcome to today's show, joining us all the way from Jamaica, Klao Bell-Lewis. Welcome, Klao.
Hi, Marcus. It's really a pleasure being here, and congratulations on your program and the content you have been creating these past couple of months.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's very much well taken. So, as usual, I have a list of questions for you, like I do all my guests, and we always have to start with the most important one because everyone got to where they did on a particular path, and each person is unique. So, in your case, what's the path you took to become a project manager? How did you get involved in project management?
Well, all managers are involved in projects. And after a particular experience where I had to execute a week of events to mark my company's 50th anniversary, I thought to myself, there has to be a better way. And this was back in 2008. And I started researching projects, project management, and came across the PMP program, and began the journey at that time in 2009 and got certified in 2011.
Nice, very nice. Now, when you're working with people, since you've worked in a lot of places like the places that I've listed earlier, as a project manager, what do you really consider sort of a best way to gain respect from the stakeholders on a project?
One, you deliver on what is expected. Two, you get it done. There's nothing like getting it done. Understand the culture of the organization and the pace of the organization. Work within the pace of the organization and meet your objectives, really.
Okay. Any good tools that you recommend to better manage stakeholders?
Well, in the organizations where I've worked, in terms of stakeholder management tools, they've been built in-house. But just online, you can find some. On the pmi.org website, you can find some, but also your basic Excel sheet, you can create your own map to track your stakeholders and to make your own notes. We know about the quadrants and we know about the kinds of notes. And as I tell people, you may have a format or a version for the lessons learned and for the official documentation, and then you have one that you keep at the back end close to your chest. Or there are some things that you and your team members may just be aware of that you discuss offline. But the key is, though, to really be a person of integrity, to be a dependable and reliable person, recognize that you're there to serve the organization as a project manager, and people do value when they can count on you, and when you earn their respect by following up and doing what you say you'll do. So the best way to manage is by being authentic and being a person of integrity in how you engage.
Yeah, I like that. Now, project managers, we're always dealing with top executive management, top management. Any techniques to best engage those folks at the C-suite, for example? Any best way to try and engage them?
It's so much easier when your senior executives have sight of your work directly. So to the extent that you're able to allow them to see you and see your work, we're not talking about overstepping your boss. You're talking about building trust and giving them the ability to understand what you do. Sometimes out of respect for their time, you may not engage enough. And surprisingly, the senior leaders are actually curious about what you're doing. So each organization is different. Each environment is different. You'll have to study the environment and understand what they need. Is your boss a WhatsApp person who just wants a quick touch base? Does he want a meeting? Or does he need the big report at the end of the month? Does he want a one pager? Really try to understand. But in addition to your boss, you need to know the people closest to your boss. So his executive assistant, how trusted is she? How much of a gatekeeper is he? You may need to ensure that that person is fed a lot of information about what you do, because he or she spends more time with that executive, and he or she as an executive leader trusts his or her assistant. So you have to know your environment, scan the environment, and be a student of your environment.
Like that student of the environment. Now, when you're working with stakeholders, measuring that stakeholder engagement efforts really helps to identify what strategies help move your project. Obviously, how do you measure whether the stakeholder engagement work you're doing is successful or not?
For me and my personality type, qualitatively, constant engagement, conversations. I listen very keenly. Information goes a very far way with me and my training and my background. So I take a lot from what is said and what is not said. However, you also use quantifiable trackers, not forgetting from the outset what the priorities were for each stakeholder. And of course, in addition to being a student of your environment and paying attention and using your emotional intelligence, you also would have had those conversations to get the specific feedback about the priority areas. Whether it is, don't embarrass me, or they may say something that, it's not explicit, but, oh, bring so and so into the meetings. Why? Don't ask twice, So when you pay attention to those things, you take note. Okay, manage risks carefully, manage reputational risks carefully, ensure there's high visibility. If somebody, for example, speaks about high visibility around the project, what would be satisfactory? In Jamaica, there is a major newspaper which some traditional persons think that's, the thing becomes official once you get coverage there. Understand if that's a priority and go for coverage there as part of the process. And I mean, I had that experience when I was working with one company that was building a new headquarters, and it was a huge deal. It had a lot of impact and direct impact on the community, but also on the country because of the company which won the bid. Now, there were companies outside of the country and companies inside of the country which bid, and a company outside of Jamaica won, and that had to be very carefully managed. And throughout the process, communicating around the project was very important, and specifically how and the channel. So understanding that in terms of what your key leaders prioritize, but also the target audiences who he or she as your leaders and your key sponsors want to focus on. Those things can help you to understand if you're hitting the target or missing the targets about what their priorities are.
So they say good stakeholder engagement strategy helps drive results. What are some of the activities that you do to best transition, say, stakeholders from being detractors, because we know there's several of those, to being their allies or the champion supporters of your project?
I will say that it's always very difficult and it changes. Sometimes you can't win, and sometimes it means accepting that risk of the difficult person who will not be on side. But I tell you, it's always important to deliver. Remember what's a priority. So I had a brand transition project once, or a brand refresh project. And the reveal was going to happen at an annual press conference, which was a major highlight event. And there was a very strong and influential person in the organization who, on the day of the event, 15 minutes before start, went to my boss at the time, the president of a very powerful organization, and said, "Don't you see she has messed up the logo and it is all wrong? It needs to be removed." Now, he's very closely aligned with that person. So he had to manage her and manage the other objectives. So he was quite diplomatic and smart. We had a quick conversation about how afterwards we would review. And that was necessary so we could focus on delivering the priority, which was a press conference, which was being beamed to more than 30 countries within the 15 minutes. So again, sometimes you may not win all. At the same time, managing your own ego is important. Remembering what is important, then you need to keep them satisfied and ensure that they feel very informed. Take them along with you very, very closely in order to keep them satisfied and keep them engaged. But most of all, to ensure that the way is clear for you to deliver what you're expected to.
Yeah, it's always important to keep those who are important as close to you as needed.
Yes,
Now,
yes, and it takes a lot of humility to do that, and just again managing your own ego. It's really important.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want the ego to get out of the way. There's certainly
No,
a
no.
downside to that if it does happen, no doubt. If you look, and I know you're heavily involved with an outreach program, what are some lessons learned, say, from executing a multi-site community outreach program like you've done, offering those services and support to community residents? What any lessons learned from outreach programs?
Well, having the right team makes a difference. And you reference in particular an activity I had in Jamaica, which had a very high profile and involved cleaning public spaces, as in sanitizing public spaces, which is usually the work of the municipal authorities. But my company at the time decided to take this on in support of the municipal authority, but also to build a sense of reassurance, given that COVID had just arrived and people were not sure what's going on. Is it in the air? Is it on the ground? Okay, fine. So we'll help to clean spaces. And that involved pulling together teams of people who had never worked together before, but also who had never done this project before. And I had not done the project before. So what that involved was consciously and mindfully embedding respect and a sense and reaffirming the expertise of each person and group brought on. So I had 3 site visits and each person went along. And one team member, for example, was the coordinator for the work crew. These were the people who would be on the streets, sweeping away the rubbish, doing the scrubbing. They were no less important than the representative from the mayor's office. So when we had at each time when I needed an opinion, I would ask each person's viewpoint, whether or not they were relevant to that particular instance, but just ensuring that everybody had a voice. Yes. And again, another example of showing respect, deference, and inclusion. I think fundamentally it's about showing respect, deference, and inclusion. That was one of the big takeaways for me, and building and deepening that sense of ownership of the project.
I like that, deepening ownership. What are some ways you recommend to, say, best engage team members in a project? And that's sort of one thing that outside of the stakeholders, just within the project, any key takeaways?
Well, once again, and that can be difficult, especially if, say, you're walking into a new environment. One thing which helps me, it doesn't always work because it can be against the grain of how those who were there before naturally work. But establish a channel. Ask the questions. How do you like to communicate? What works? And then you explain why another forum might be better. So in one new environment, my touch point, the person with whom I was today said, "Oh, just give me a call at any time, etc., etc." Which is all right, but we also need set times to knock heads. So she brilliantly managed to get a channel opened up within the company's Slack for me. So we established a Slack channel, so we're able to talk there, keep all our documents there, etc. Otherwise, what would happen is we'd have some material coming from my email, someone WhatsApp, someone phone calls, and that's not the best. That's not the best way.
Streamlining is no doubt.
Yes.
Any recommendations on how to build strong relationships with stakeholders? I know you've talked a lot about stakeholders, and maybe any methods for identifying, say, communicating and mobilizing those stakeholders in a more efficient way.
It starts from you as a leader. Understand your role as a leader, and understand your role as one who is there to serve. Manage your ego and be genuinely interested in the people. understand who the people are, respect that they have a role, they have a say, they may even have certain powers you might not have anticipated. But position yourself as a servant leader and also a student, right? So sometimes some of those persons may know more than you do. You may know more, but my preference is to operate on the basis of deference, respect, inclusion, right, with each person. It has been said, each man is your superior in that you learn of him. I take that into all my relationships, and I find that after a while, sometimes it's not easily accepted because people may be on different wavelengths. But after a while, authenticity wins out. You find people can detect when someone is being authentic. People can detect when somebody is really committed to the common objective, you know, even if they're resistant, even if their own natural way is still difficult to work with. Consistency, authenticity, respect should really coat your interaction. This, of course, along with all the important recommendations made in the PIMBOK, the tried and proven methods about, you know, establishing communication, establishing meetings, keeping people informed, etc., etc.
Nice. Now, I don't know about the project management within Jamaica, but any recommendations for, say, Jamaicans who want to get into the project management field, or anyone for that matter, but specifically Jamaicans? Any paths?
Project management has certainly been growing in Jamaica. The project management chapter here has been quite vibrant. It has been around for, I believe, more than 30 years, I think.
Oh, wow.
And the leaders of the chapter are quite well-respected persons in companies where the difference and their difference have been seen and made. Project management is growing. The more visible certain persons have been, the more they're able to influence others. So I say that life is one big project, but also everybody in management should be certified in project management, I believe, because we all have to do projects in our jobs. So it's a responsible thing to learn how to do it as optimally as possible, using tried and proven methods that are available through the standards that are accepted. And for us, it's PMI. You know, for others, it might be Prince or other types of programs.
Just out of curiosity, and I know you've worked in the States and Jamaica, any big differences between project management in the United States or North America versus Jamaica?
Well, in the US specifically, I did not work as a project manager during those times, although I do have to collaborate with colleagues from all over the world, especially while at Scotiabank. You're talking about working on rolling out major campaigns with colleagues in different Caribbean countries and our headquarters in Toronto. I was at Caribbean Cement Company, which is part of Cemex, a global firm, and I had to work with my colleagues in Panama, Mexico, Colombia, all across. And what is key is to understand the tools and the channels that they use that is, you know, established. One tip, if your country doesn't have access, that can be a big, you know, it can throw things off. So try to get access to the tools, or work very closely with one person who can help you to communicate and lock into the established channels where the flow of information already is. I would say that was one important takeaway from, especially recently, working with my colleagues in different countries.
Nice. Any plans to do any speeches? I know COVID is kind of calming down in some areas. Any plans to fly to anywhere in the world to do any speeches?
Definitely not flying, but it has been wonderful that I have been able to participate in talks in different places, several states in the US, recently in South Africa, and one coming up in Canada.
Nice.
In
Nice.
September, actually, yes. So, you know, I don't want to be flying. Since 2019, I've only flown once, so that was a few weeks ago after vaccination and everything. But based on what I observed, I think it's still responsible for persons to stay home if they can.
Yeah, yeah. With being online, you can be anywhere in the world at any time and
exactly
still do your presentation. So that's cool.
Absolutely.
And if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way we can do so?
Well, Marcus, I think for the purposes of your audience and my being your guest, I'd be happy if they'd like to get in touch with me, they do so through you.
Okay, sure. All right, excellent,
Yes.
excellent.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for being on the show, Klao. It's been absolutely splendid, and you're such a wonderful guest. I think there's just this sort of fluid connection between the questions and the answers. Absolutely fascinating. So.
Well, thank you. It's really my pleasure. And Marcus, our story is a very good one. I think you should share it. And I think the connection that we have made makes it very easy to talk because we have been having the dialogue and we have common interests and we understand each other in this way. So it's really a pleasure and quite easy to speak with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, you're very much welcome. Yeah, it's funny how relationships work. You start on LinkedIn and then your emails, and then soon you're on a show, and you just, that's just how it happens.
Absolutely. But then also, that's not just how it happens, because you recall when we touched base, we spoke about why we should connect on LinkedIn. And my personal view is you should not include people in your network with whom you do not have a legitimate connection. Yeah. LinkedIn is not the place just to build a wide audience. You should know them. Because when you let someone into your network, you're exposing them to your other persons, and you have an obligation to them as well. So you and I sought to establish a network, a connection outside, and then became LinkedIn connections. Yeah. And of course, have worked together so well with speaking opportunities going both sides. So.
No, it's true. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. Well, I want to thank you once again for being on the show, and have yourself a fantastic day in Jamaica.
Thank you. Same to you. Everybody keep safe, get vaccinated.
And now a word from our sponsors. The Lewis Institute provides an enterprise project management program that does more than just train PMs. It helps support them from the CEO level on down. These courses help certify project leaders and prepare them to pass the PMP exam. The Business Agility Institute provides Emergence, the Journal of Business Agility. This quarterly publication brings you inspiring stories from the most innovative companies. Use the promo code ANALYST to get a 10% discount on your annual subscription.